Okay, we're in chapter 15. This is all about personality and social interactions. Okay, so if you look at the outline, we're going to talk about the domain we're in, and then we talk about three important topics: selection, evocation, and manipulation. So there's Roman numeral 1, 2, and 3. In this particular lecture, I'm going to stop at the end of Roman numeral 2, and the next lecture, I'll do Roman numeral 3. Okay, so we are leaving the previous domain. We're going into the social and cultural domain. This is where personality affects and is affected by the social and cultural context in which it is found. So personality is not something that's only in the heads of people or residing only in their nervous system or in their genes. In this domain, the emphasis is on personality as it's affected by and expressed through social roles and expectations and through relationships with others. Personality interacts, this chapter talks about how it interacts with social situations in three key processes: through selection, how we select our friends, our dates, our spouses; through evocation, meaning what we bring about in others. So our personality evokes certain reactions from others, brings about certain reactions. That's what evocation means. And by the way, their personality qualities evoke certain reactions or responses from us. And also we're going to look at this through the lens of manipulation, how we manipulate or influence others. So that'll be our Roman numeral 1, 2, 3: selection, evocation, and manipulation. So selection. So first of all, in everyday life, we choose to enter into situations and avoid other situations. That is called situation selection, the tendency to choose or select the situations in which one finds oneself. And it's often based on our personalities. Do we want to go to a specific party tonight? Do we want to take a specific job? Do we want to date or marry a specific person? These decisions help determine our social worlds and put us on one path or another, like choosing a marriage or life partner. That's a great example of selection. It's going to determine who we're going to spend the majority of our time with, our family. Let's explore that big selection issue. So that's capital A on the outline: selecting a marriage or life partner. It's interesting. Researchers looked at what personality characteristics do we desire in a marriage or life partner. Like, what do we want our long-term partner to be like? And researchers got very interested in this question and undertook a large international study. Like over 10,000 subjects on 6 different continents, 5 islands. Everyone completed questionnaires. And the researchers feel like every major racial group, religious group, and political system was represented. The economic statuses of participants were varied. Major cities were involved, tiny villages. It was the most massive coordinated effort ever to explore what are people looking for in the selection of a mate. And they looked at questions like this. So look at the questionnaire, and then we're going to talk about results. But it says, okay, please evaluate the following factors in choosing a mate or marriage partner. If you consider it to be indispensable, give it a 3. Important, give it a 2. Desirable but not very important, a 1. And irrelevant or unimportant, give it a 0. So look at some of the things they were looking at. Good cook or housekeeper. Is that important in your spouse or marriage partner or significant other? And look at all. Pleasing disposition, number 2. Sociability, number 3. Similar educational background. Refinement, neatness. Good financial prospect. Chastity, meaning no prior intercourse. Dependable character. Emotional stability. Number 10. Desire for home and children. Favorable social status. Good looks. Similar religious background. Ambitious and industrious. Similar political background. Mutual attraction. Love, meaning they love you back. Good health. Education and intelligence. So let's look at what ended up after they gave this worldwide. Let's look at what ended up coming back. So it It's broken out here, and this is for a page out of your book. Males and females. It's broken out by sex. And you can see the number one most favored characteristic, viewed as indispensable by almost everyone, was mutual attraction or love. That this other person feels the same way about you, that they're attracted to you and love you. So that was number one for both males and females. And look, and they're the same for the first four. So the next three are personality characteristics of the partner. That they have a dependable character, are emotionally stable and mature, and that they have a pleasing disposition. And those are personality characteristics. And if you notice, those three traits are quite close to the three of the descriptions of the big five. Dependability is close to conscientiousness. Emotional stability is identical to the fourth factor. And pleasing disposition is quite close to agreeableness. So when specifically looking at personality characteristics, what are we attracted to? Do our personality characteristics influence who we want to date? So let's talk about who is attracted to whom. So over the past century, there have been two competing theories regarding who is attracted to whom. And we'll look at both of them, and then we'll see which one has the most support. So the first theory is called the complementary needs theory. This is a theory that suggests that people are attracted to those who have different, and that's important for you to have, different personality dispositions than they have themselves. For example, someone who's dominant might choose a submissive mate so they can be in control. And you can think of it as opposites attract. That's kind of how to summarize the complementary needs theory. Picking someone who's opposite. The second theory that's been going around is called the attraction similarity theory. Now, this is a theory that states that people are attracted to those who have similar personality characteristics to them. Like a dominant person is attracted to another dominant person because they like someone who stands up to them. They can have feisty conversations. Or somebody who's shy chooses somebody who's shy because that's more comfortable for their relationship. And you can think of it of birds of a feather flock together. That's a theory that says birds of a feather flock together. We choose people who are similar to us. So there have been proponents, by the way, for both theories, complementary needs and attraction similarity. So years people have gone back and forth. Now, they've collected data for the last several decades, and they feel that over these several years, the data overwhelmingly supports one of these two theories. And by the way, it was pretty overwhelming. There's virtually no data to back the complementary needs theory, and there is significant data that backs the attraction similarity theory. Isn't that interesting? Now, by the way, we're always going to know some exceptions, but they were looking at large numbers and statistical significant differences. So we're always, you'll always know that opposite couple that stayed together and does just fine. Sometimes it's funny because we know a lot of opposite couples. They say they're opposite, but when you talk to them about personality traits or what's really important in their lives, morals, ethics, values, and the personality traits, they're actually quite similar. And people who are happiest together tend to have followed the attraction similarity theory. One of the most common findings in this research, looking at attraction similarity, that we choose people who have similar personalities to us. One of the most interesting finding is the phenomena known as assortative mating. And that means people marry people that they're similar to in regard to not just personality, but also physical traits, race, and ethnicity. Pretty much every variable they looked at, we tend to choose partners that are similar to us. And studies have looked at the personality characteristics like of the big five: extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, emotional stability, and intellect or openness, for the person and for a mate they would select. And people rated the personality traits for people they would like to select as a desired partner. And did they want a specific trait to be high or low? or how high and how low. And these people were also rated themselves on the 5 factors and whether they were high or low. Data overwhelmingly supported that people want to select mates who are similar to their own ratings on the 5 factors of personality. Isn't that interesting? So let's look at what makes us happy. So even though we may want or desire a mate who's high in certain traits that we are also high in, or low in traits that we're low in, does that then make us happiest? Interesting to explore because divorce rates are very high all over the globe. So it turns out that our partner's personality has a substantial effect on relationship happiness and satisfaction. Research examined single people, dating couples, and married couples, and here's what they found. They looked at years together, ratings of happiness or satisfaction with the relationship, and then they looked at number of divorces or splitting up. It turns out that personality traits play a big role in marriage satisfaction. Big role. And relationship satisfaction. The personality traits of one of the partners actually were able to predict the other partner's happiness. And I'm going to say that again because it's so interesting. That personality traits play a big role in marriage and relationship satisfaction. The personality traits of one of the partners were able to predict the other partner's happiness. Now, specifically, people were happiest with their marriages. So when they're looking at married people, they were happiest with their marriages. And if they weren't married, with their relationships, if their partner was agreeable, emotionally stable, conscientious, and open. And you can see that in the PowerPoint. People are happiest with their marriages if their partners were agreeable, emotionally stable, conscientious, and open. They view their partner as being affectionate. They had better sex lives. They enjoyed spending time together more. They saw their spouses as being encouraging. And they saw their spouses as also being a source of stimulating conversation. So it was interesting that this was in spite of whether these couples chose these traits as ones that were important to them for their partners to have. In other words, even if they initially identified other traits of potential mates, they were most happy ultimately if their partner was agreeable, emotionally stable, conscientious, and open. People who were married to partners who were low in any one of those or more than one, they were the most unhappy in their relationship. And if they were married, they were most at risk for divorce. And the more of these traits their spouse was low in, the more unhappy the person was in that relationship. Pretty interesting. Let's talk about selective breakups. So we just said that personality traits did predict who would be happiest in relationships, but do they also predict who we will selectively break up with? And lots of people stay in relationships even though they are not happy, and we know lots of people like that. Can we predict who might be more likely to leave their partner due to personality traits? Well, according to one theory of conflict, we should be able to predict breakups. It's called the violation of desire theory. And this says this predicts more breakups when one's desires are violated than when they are fulfilled. So research suggests that we do see this theory supported in 2 ways, by the way. First, with specifically desired personality traits, and second, with similarity. So what that means is being married to someone who lacks the personality characteristics that are most widely desired puts one at risk for breaking up. So the 3 that they found here were agreeableness, emotional stability, and conscientiousness. And they use terminology, sometimes they call it a pleasing disposition, emotional stability, and dependable. So being married to someone who lacks those personality characteristics put the person most at risk for breaking up. So, and that's similar to what we said before about divorces. Being happy, openness was also one of those. It's not included here, but it's very similar. And by the way, those who fail to select partners similar to themselves, they were also likely to have a selective breakup. So again, those who fail to select partners who are similar to themselves were also likely to break up. So overall, we saw the most predictable breakups if partners were low in the desired traits we mentioned and were not similar to their partners. Okay, so let's talk about shyness and selection. So in addition to selecting a mate, psychologists look at personality and other types of selection of situations. One that has gotten attention is regarding shyness. And shyness is a tendency to feel tense, worried, or anxious during social interactions, or even when anticipating a social interaction. So most people report being shy at one time or another, but some people are what they consider disproportionately shy, or more shy than most. And it turns out that the effects of shyness and situation selection are pretty well documented. There's a lot of research here. Some of the research suggests the following. Shy people tend to avoid social situations. That's not surprising. But they also found that it can result in a form of social isolation. Shy women are less likely to bring up issues of things like contraception with their partners. So they're less likely, for example, to discuss going on or off the pill, wearing a condom, so contraception. They found that put themselves at potential dangerous situations, put themselves in dangerous situations more so than females who are less shy. Another finding is shy women are less likely in general to see a gynecologist. Shy women also avoided risky potential situations like gambling. They don't like to risk a lot. They tend to be more conservative. When they were doing research, shy females got more nervous during research where they were asked to take risks while gambling, even though it was just a research setting. So it's pretty interesting. So overall, what the research suggests is that shyness does appear to have an impact on situation selection, whether we choose to enter or avoid certain situations. Okay, the second key process that demonstrates how personality can affect social interactions is evocation. So we talked about selection, Roman numeral 1. Now, let's look at Roman numeral 2, evocation. So evocation, look at the top of the PowerPoint. It's a form of person-situation interaction based on the idea that certain personality traits may evoke consistent responses. Evoke means bring about. May bring about consistent responses from the environment, particularly the social environment. So let's explore some personality traits that evoke or bring about certain responses from others. That's really what we're talking about, bringing about something in our social environment. Well, let's look at aggression and the evocation of hostility. So research has shown that people who are aggressive expect that others will be hostile to them. And it turns out, by the way, that the people they do end up being hostile. Aggressive people actually evoke or bring about hostility from others. So aggressive people evoke hostility from others. So what they found is aggressive people consistently interpret ambiguous means unclear. So aggressive people consistently interpret unclear behaviors from others as being hostile, intentionally hostile even. So for example, in the research, the act of being bumped into. So there was no intent specified at all. It could be 100% accidental or not. It was really left very ambiguous. Aggressive people who scored high in aggressiveness, consistently interpreted the ambiguous or unclear situation as having a hostile intent, consistently. So when somebody bumped into them and there was really no inclination given whether this was completely accidental or completely not accidental, if the person was high in aggressiveness, they consistently saw it as a hostile action. And by the way, this is referred to as the hostile attributional bias. the tendency to infer hostile intent on the part of others in the face of uncertain or ambiguous behavior from others. Remember, ambiguous means unclear. So because people have a hostile attributional bias, aggressive people tend to treat others in an aggressive manner. And those other people, in return, respond with aggressiveness or hostility. And this confirms what the aggressive person thought in the first place, that the other person was indeed hostile. So aggressiveness does beget aggressiveness. It brings about aggressiveness. But the original people failed to realize that the hostility from the other people is actually a result of their very own initial actions. They simply don't realize that they evoked the hostile actions in the first place. Because in the same situation, when people were not aggressive, they're very low in aggressiveness, they did not infer that this bumping into them was hostile. They inferred it to be accidental. And then the other person didn't behave at all hostilely or aggressively. So research in this area has helped to solidify the belief that personality plays a key role in the process of evoking emotions from others. Like our personality plays a role in the emotions that we bring out in other people. Well, let's keep talking about this. Let's look more closely at aggression and evoking emotion, the emotion of anger. So evocation, bringing about anger and upset in partners. Research supports that anger and upset can be evoked from our partners based on personality traits. Specifically, a large study was conducted looking at the personality characteristics of married husbands and wives. The personality data was collected from 3 sources. They got self-report data, spouse report, and independent reports of 2 interviewers. The instrument obtained sources of anger and upset in close relationships. So they wanted to look at anger and upset in these relationships. It was based on acts that men and women perform that anger and upset the other one. So here's a short version. Take a look. So it says in the instructions, we all do things that upset or anger other people from time to time. Think of a close romantic partner, close friend with whom you've been involved. Below is a list of things this person might have done that evoked anger or upset in you. Please read down the list and simply place a check by the things your partner or close friend has done in the past year. So it's a past year that have irritated, angered, annoyed, or upset you. And you just read through it. And this is a short list. But example, he or she treated me like I was stupid or inferior. He or she demanded too much of my time. Ignored my feelings. Slapped me. Saw someone else intimately. Did not help to clean up. Fussed too much with his or her appearance. Acted too moody. Refused to have sex with me. Talked about members of the opposite sex as if they were sex objects. He or she got drunk. They did not dress well or appropriately for the social gathering. Told me I was ugly. Tried to use me for sexual purposes. Acted selfishly. And you just read through the list, and there was a long list, and you checked any of them that have irritated, angered, annoyed, or upset you in the past year. So here's what, after all the data was collected, the analysis work conducted to determine which specific acts from the list evoked anger and upset the most, and also predicted which personality traits these people doing the acts were likely to have. So here's what we saw. By far, the strongest predictor of evoked anger and upset in partners were 2 personality traits, disagreeableness and emotional instability. And by the way, the strongest predictor of these 2 was disagreeableness. So let's look at what they found. Disagreeable spouses. We'll start with disagreeable because it was the strongest predictor. It's more strongly predicted. We'll look at emotional instability in a second, but we'll start with disagreeableness because, again, it was the strongest predictor of anger and upset in a partner. So how? What was going on here? Disagreeable spouses evoked anger and upset by doing the following things. And this is something you should try to remember. This is important. Disagreeable spouses evoked anger and upset by neglecting or rejecting their spouse, being abusive, committing infidelity means they cheated on them, abusing alcohol, insulting the other's appearance, or being self-centered. So again, those 6 were done by disagreeable spouses. Emotionally unstable spouses evoked anger and upset by doing the following: being moody and irritable, being jealous and possessive, and demanding too much attention. And these results overall have been replicated several times. And by the way, the opposite's also found. So the opposite, overall, spouses that are agreeable evoke less anger and upset in their partners. And interestingly enough, they also found that the effects of agreeableness and emotional stability extend from intimate relationships to the workplace. Those that are high in agreeableness and high in emotional stability have the least conflict and evoked less anger and upset in their workplace. Makes sense. So these links that we're talking about between personality traits and conflict or evoking anger and upset, they appear early in life. This isn't something that comes late in adulthood. You can start seeing this pretty early. Research actually shows you can start predicting evoked emotions based on the personality traits of others, personality traits of agreeableness and emotional stability as young as early adolescence. They found that adolescents that are high in disagreeableness and high in emotional instability evoked more anger and upset from their peers and family. Okay, let's talk about evocation through expectancy confirmation. So what does expectancy confirmation mean, first of all? It's people's beliefs about the personality characteristics of others can cause them to evoke in others the actions that are consistent with the initial beliefs. Okay, just kind of let your brain chew on that for a minute. People's beliefs about the personality characteristics of others cause them to evoke in others actions that are consistent with the initial beliefs. So this has also been called self-fulfilled prophecy and behavior confirmation. Let's see if I have that. Oh, no. So you want to have that written here. This is called self-fulfilled prophecy, and they also call it behavior confirmation. We're going to call it expectancy confirmation, but all 3 of those mean the same thing. So expectancy confirmation, then you can put in parentheses self-fulfilled prophecy and behavior confirmation. And really what this all means is we believe something about someone else, and then we have a way of actually evoking those very characteristics from them because of our original belief. And it's interesting because it really says, can mere beliefs be strong enough to evoke real behaviors from others just because we believe them? So just because we believe someone to be a certain way, can we make them that way? And research shows it's pretty interesting. It really supports, yeah. So we're going to go back several decades. In the late 70s, they did a really interesting series of studies. They had individuals that were led to believe that they were going to be dealing with hostile and aggressive people during the study. So they were told that these people were very hostile and aggressive. But in reality, the other subjects were rated as below average, at the most average, but almost always below average in hostility and aggressiveness. So the subjects were then introduced. So they're both participating. The first subject is told you're going to be dealing with aggressive and hostile person. But actually, the other subject is actually low in aggressiveness and hostility. So then they're introduced one-on-one, and very interesting results. First of all, when they're told that the other person is going to be hostile and aggressive, they found that that first individual's beliefs that the other person would be hostile and aggressive actually led to the first person to act in an aggressive manner toward that unsuspecting target. And then the behavior of the first person caused the unsuspecting target to respond in a hostile way. So then they actually ended up behaving in a way that was evoked by the individual, and it led to that expected hostility that the first individual actually expected. So again, two subjects are introduced. The first subject is told they're going to meet somebody who's hostile and aggressive, but in reality, the other subject is actually low in hostility and aggressiveness. The second subject isn't told anything, that they don't expect anything about the first subject, about who they're going to meet. So when these two meet, the first subject, who's believing that the other person's going to be hostile and aggressive, they instantly behave more hostilely, even though the other subject didn't do anything. But because that first subject does behave in a hostile and aggressive way, that unsuspecting second subject does respond with hostility and aggression. Therefore, confirming what the first person thought about them. So beliefs about other people that we have actually can create that behavior in them. It's a really interesting study. Now it's slightly different from what we talked about earlier, the hostile attributional bias, because in that study, the initial behavior was always neutral. Here, the initial behavior is actually hostile. The first subject reacts with hostility toward the unsuspecting second subject. And by the way, this expectancy confirmation, it happens every day in every life often. We hear about somebody's reputation, and based on what we hear, we start to expect them to behave in a certain way, and we treat them differently. And lo and behold, their behaviors support our initial beliefs. We do this when we're prejudiced against groups of people based on various reasons. Our preconceived notions, even if they're wrong, can actually evoke certain behaviors from other people. A common example is when an older person thinks that adolescents are aggressive or hostile and unhelpful. You know, we see that. I've seen this happen actually. I've actually seen this occur in interactions. An older person thinks that an adolescent is, they think in general, that age group, oh, they're aggressive nowadays, hostile, unhelpful little buggers. And when the elderly person meets an adolescent, they treat that adolescent with disdain and with a certain level of anger right off the bat. And the adolescent, who is a good person, and when I've seen the situation, I know that adolescent is a good person. They respond with this level of hostility to the older person that I'm actually surprised by. Then the elderly person says, see, all young kids are the same. Disrespectful, unhelpful, little buggers. So we have to be careful. Apparently, we can evoke certain behaviors in others. Now, here's what I hope that we can do with this information. Use it for good. We've been discussing evoking negative personality traits in others, but the good news is, research supports, you can also evoke positive personality traits in others. And think about the sayings, you make me want to be a better person, or I like who I am around you. That's what that's about, that we can evoke positive behaviors in others. We just need to be more aware. Because people live up to what we believe them to be, oftentimes, we need to believe in others and have high expectations. And people behave that way. Because if we go in there with this negative belief, then often people live down to our expectations. Okay, that's the end of Roman numeral 2. We'll pick up Roman numeral 3 in another separate recording.